Welcome to yet another ham radio video. This is Jay, KQ4DUX. Thanks for joining me today. If you're new to the channel, I'm a portable operator and I do this channel from a beginner's perspective. So I'm not claiming to be an expert, but I'm documenting the journey of learning and developing my skills in ham radio. Today we're talking about the POTA Performer. This is a POTA Performer build. I started this project maybe 6 months ago, made a couple of alterations and revisions, and I ended up putting a couple of these together to sell at local ham fest. So I'm just gonna explain my thought process. I have made a little bit of adaptations, do a little different than what the KJ6ER plans are. If you want to see those plans, they're very good, very well detailed, lots of pictures. You can go that route and build it exactly like he did, or you can do it like I'm doing it here, and maybe that will work well for you also. So let's take a look at the things you will need, the tools and materials. You should be able to build this for about $25, maybe $30 at the filming of this video. Here are the basics that you will need, and again, just basic tools. I'll be showing you a way to do this that you will need to solder. So if you go that route, you will need a soldering gun of some type and some solder and all those materials. You also need basic wire crimpers, strippers, and that kind of thing, and terminals for your wire. Obviously a tape measure if you're going to be measuring lengths of wire, lengths of the pipe, and so forth. Heat shrink is also recommended and a very good thing to use. You probably could get away without it. Here I have a piece of coax, just kind of some scraps I had laying around. Why don't we look at this end? That'll be a little better. But this is a solid copper center conductor and a copper braid. Works very well. We'll get into that later. You will need some way to connect it to your coax. So here's one option. Again, I'll be describing that in detail later. First thing you will need obviously is the PVC pipe. This is 2-inch PVC Schedule 40 pipe that I purchased at Home Depot or any such hardware store. Should carry this, a very common item. I'm using between 4 and 5 feet. I want to say about 52 inches. You can vary that. You probably want to get above 4 feet, but if you get too high, it may be difficult to adjust the whip depending on how tall you are and how far you need to reach. With that, you will need a cap of some kind. There's a difference here. See how this cap is rounded on top? That will work, but is a little more difficult to get the hole exactly in the center so your whip goes straight up. You can get around that if it's not perfect, or you can get one that's flat. I would recommend getting one with a flat top if you can find one. And again, I don't glue these on because I want them to be removable so that you can service them and replace parts if necessary. So let's take a look at the first one I built, and there's two different ways of doing this. The first way is just with a piece of coax. That way, the difference being wherever the coaxes separate, and if you're just running wires, you could just use 2 regular wires. I think these are, I'm not sure if that's 12 or 14 gauge. Whatever length of wire you have after the coax, you need to add that to your radiating element length. So let's just make an extreme example. If I had 3 feet of wire, well, that becomes essentially a radiator, and this is just connecting to the rest of the radiator. So that will throw off your measurements if you're going off materials you found online for whip lengths and so forth. You need to take that into account. Another thing you need to take into account is how far, where you want to come out of there with your coax or your wire, however you're going to do it. if you get too close and you don't have enough wire, it can be difficult to get the cap on and off and tighten the bolts and whatnot. So on this one is, I've been running for quite a while. This part here actually is from a mag mount that I modified, and this was leftover parts. I had a hard time finding this piece, these two pieces. If I could, I would probably use this on any of the ones that I build in the future. This is a really nice addition, whereas this one is just basically the coupling nut, which does work fine, but this looks nicer. It's a little bit better, and you're spreading out the force of when it tips, you know, in the wind or whatnot. And I don't really think that's going to be a problem, but it just looks a little cleaner. It's a little easier to work with, so I would do that. So from there, what I did is I simply separated the shielding on the coax, soldered that, and ran that just to a bolt with a wing nut. And that's where you attach the counterpoise wire. So I think on KJ6ER he clamps on his counterpoises. The reason I do this is because this is kind of a dual purpose for me, that this wire I actually will use with like the banana jack. So this is basically the same antenna made of wire, same measurements, same system. But I can take this from my 12 meter, my 17, 20, 30, whatever, and all these are interchangeable. Whereas the KJ6ER, he links segments in the radios, so you just have one set and you disconnect segments to achieve the right radio for each band. Again, there's different ways to mount this to the ground. Some people use a spike. That works in some environments. Obviously here I'm using the paracord and just these eye hooks. And you can find these in almost any hardware store. Purchase a set of eye hooks. You are going to need two nuts, one on the inside and one on the outside. Mostly they just come with one, but make sure you get two so you can bolt them on the inside. And I did use a nylon locking nut for this one. And for this one I did not. We'll see if that makes a difference. But the other thing is, how do you index these? I thought about how to do that and maybe make a template, or you know, marking them out some way. What I found to be the best was to just use a flexible tape like people use when they're making fabric projects. And I think it ended up that these are 2.5 inches, so it was 0, 2.5, 5, and then, you know, it's approximately 7.5 in circumference, and I marked those out. And then let's go to getting away from using the coax this way. So I slipped that through and out the pipe down the line there. And this, I mean, it looks crude and unprofessional because this has been taken apart several times, broken, put back together. So obviously this looks a lot neater and more professional. But the advantage of this, you don't need this part. So you have to have this like UHF style bulkhead, which you need here. And this you could just take out and hook up to whatever you're doing. I was saying that you would be able to get by without soldering, which I guess is technically true, but thinking about it, I did solder this connection, which you may be able to do with a connector. And see, this is a connector. So if you use a butt connector there, I guess you could do this without soldering. Whereas this one you definitely will need to solder, because you need to solder to the center pin of this bulkhead, is what I did here. I don't know if you can see that in there, but so that's your center conductor, the green wire, and then the other one goes to your counterpoise. And then on the other end of the green wire, which goes to your whip, so this is a 3/8 by 24 bolt, and then I have what's called a fender washer. This is a large washer. You can get these at a lot of hardware stores. There are different sizes available, but that's just going to help spread out the force on the nut and hopefully make it more stable. And then you just screw your whip directly into the top. I'm going to get my whip right here and demonstrate that. So I bought this is called a coupling nut. So a 3/8 by 24 bolt and a 3/8 by 24 coupling nut. And then it will screw in directly to that. You want to pay attention to the length of your bolt. I don't remember exactly, but you can see how this seats all the way. It's making contact. If your bolt is too long, your bolt will stick up into this coupling nut too far, and you will have a space there, which will put undue stress on your whip. So you want to make sure your bolt is not too long. You don't really need, I don't think, more than an inch to get through your PVC and your washers to get to there. And that's just another reason where if I could find a source for this part, I would prefer to use that. That seems to work a little better. But all in all, like I said, 25 or 30 bucks. You could put one of these together. Very durable, great for portable operations, parks on there and that sort of thing. And also, you could use it in an HOA situation where you don't want to mount anything permanently. You can deploy this most places. If you're in a really rocky environment where you couldn't pound pegs into the ground, it might be a little difficult, but typically I just use tent pegs and pound those in, and I've never had any problems with it as far as tipping over or anything like that. And one more thing to mention as I wrap up is the length of the counterpoise. So this is an elevated radial, and how I developed my own lengths was to go off what the POTA Performer build online, the KJ6ER. He has put out all of his measurements, so I used that as a starting point. I did not end up going with the exact same measurements. This is a little bit different. So you'll have to play around with that yourself. You can, if you build it exactly to the plans, it should work fine. But in my situation with running these wires, both with the banana jack and using that as a standalone antenna, and then also bolting it to one of these for a counterpoise, I end up with slightly different measurements. So this is not an equally fed, it is slightly off-center fed, so that's one thing to keep in mind. The radiating element is a little bit longer, and I won't get into formulas or exact measurements, but if you, whatever you add to the radiator, you take some away from the counterpoise, that's a rough idea that will get you close. Obviously, when you're adjusting and tuning this for your own uses, start longer. You can always cut off more and go that way rather than cutting too short. Obviously, is much more difficult to remedy. That's also the reason why I use the terminal ends with the loops on them, being these are going to be switched back and forth frequently. I'm going that route rather than just a bare wire to the banana jack, or a bare wire wrapped around the wing nut, which would fairly quickly probably break off or be degraded. In the POTA Performer plans online, he uses a quite large clamp, which works for that situation. Nothing wrong with that, but they are a little large, bulky, and expensive compared to a simple ring terminal. So I hope this video has been helpful. Like and subscribe to the channel. I am planning to do another video on the wire version, the lightweight version, and exactly how to build that. I've mentioned it several times on the channel. I've showed it in action and documented how well that works. That's a very simple antenna you can build for 20 bucks or less, and weighs less than half a pound, and you don't need any sort of transformer or anything to run that with your radio. So once again, hope to catch you on the air soon. 7-3, and thanks for watching.